One of the coolest things I've heard was like an inappropriate thing from a kid. He was like talking to his mom. He's like, she has a boy's voice. And I was like, that means I look great.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Okay, so do you have a different voice in your head that you're now speaking all your life? You've been sort of hearing yourself in the voice you use now, and now you just speak that voice? Or did you have making the commitment to make what I don't want to say a change because it's
Transition.
the transition, right?
Change, man.
Then did you make a conscious effort to now like, oh, I'm gonna also change my tone and the way I speak? Like that's what voice do you dream in? I have like those are the questions in my head.
These are great questions. So I would have dreams before I transitioned where I looked like this. And it was weird. It was almost like when I first started to kind of like change facially and physically, it was like recognizing myself in the mirror. It was such a trippy experience, you know?
Did you recognize yourself in the mirror like when you first you have to sort of come to accept and realize that who you are, and you're like, so when you had that happen in your mind and in you, did you start to see that that woman, like, you know what I mean? Did you, without the transition to what you look like?
So once I accepted how deep this went, what happened for a period of time was the dissonance between how I look in my mind once I accepted it and wasn't using all of my energy to push it away.
Right.
Versus how I would look in the mirror if I would walk by the mirror and happen to see myself, it was like painful, you know? Like what happened was when I accepted that this was who I am, this was how I looked in, you know, my soul, to use an unscientific term for what I think is a medical condition.
I know what you mean.
But
I think.
I think you do. But it became really painful when I would catch myself in the mirror and see myself not as that person. It was sort of difficult because it made me look further away from who I am than it felt when I just didn't give a shit and I was trying to eliminate as much of the pain and feel as little as possible and try to not look at this reality because it was just too scary to deal with, you know?
Yeah, it seems terrible. I don't like change at all. Like, I mean, I don't like what we're doing. What with the couch thing, pillow? What? It's going where? Like I can't imagine being like, all right, I got to switch everything. Ugh.
It's
anyway.
Bonkers.
Yes.
For sure. But, you know, beforehand, it almost seems ridiculous looking back on it, but for a period of time, I think I was more scared of coming out of the closet than I was of dying. So like I was kind of grappling with this in the 90s.
Right.
And even the early 2000s was like a really super different time, you know?
It's weird to think how different it was just 15, 20 years ago.
I think that's the way it happens. I think it's every new generation's job to like kind of terrify the generation that came before them. Right. Every new generation freaks out the one that was already here.
Right.
It's just the way it rolls. I think the world seems like it is never going to change when we're young, but then after we've gotten a couple years under our belt, just the perspective of it kind of snaps in. I mean, it's a whirlwind of things, maybe not even changing in a grand sense, but at least looking different and the values kind of shifting around. But I think whenever I feel uneasy about where things are today as far as who accepts what and I just try to remember that like the past always seems worse. Like it was always kind of more nightmarish.
Then?
I
do that a lot too, like in life in general, and with my own anxieties, which are, I get where I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have enjoyed that more instead of being frustrated or anxious to be somewhere else, like whole not, everything's always going to happen over here instead, or.
I would be careful with that, not to be prescriptive or anything, but
yeah, I am
thinking about missed opportunities and, what could have been, or, if only I had known this.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes what is happening now feel so much more miserable. It feels like you're just getting fourth place no matter what is going on in your life. And
Are you the happiest you've ever been right now? Sort of like in this...
yeah, 100%.
That's awesome.
100%. And part of it is I let go of a lot of the past. And I don't think, look, whether you need to or not, maybe changing genders fixes everything. I don't know.
Right.
But I do think there's something to be said for like committing to starting over, forgiving yourself for the mistakes you've made, not like letting yourself off the hook, but being like, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change some things. I'm not gonna regret who I was because that led to who I am now, and
right.
I have the opportunity to be like a good, happy person. And what I was gonna say is there's a possibility that like all of those like missteps in our lives that have led up to now, I mean, if they're compartmentalized right, it almost gives you a chance to have a happier life now than somebody whose natural state is just like contentment. They don't feel the value of a good day the same way as someone who's overcome a bunch of bad ones.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that.
Sweet's not as sweet without the bitter.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, how would you answer the thing that women that would be sort of like, you know what? It's not fair. She didn't have to go through any of the bleeding every month and the menstruation and the, you know what I mean?
Well, first off, let's.
My wife said that. My wife said that about Caitlyn Jenner. She was like,
did she? Okay.
She gets out of all of that.
Yeah.
That's part of what being a woman is.
Okay.
She's like, so that's not fair, right?
Well, okay.
Is that a thing you've come across at all?
Only like in a very abstract kind of. No one has ever cornered me and been like, "You're cheating,"
Right. No, it's just one of the jokingly. I think it's just one of the things that she's like, "This sucks about being a woman," and you get out of that. Like it's almost like a jokingly envious too. I think.
Though, because again, like I'm in a lot of ways sort of a human wedge issue. Like this one localized abstract thing that doesn't really affect most people's lives all of a sudden becomes this like impassioned debate. But there are some women that identify as TERFs, which is like trans exclusionary radical feminists, where they will see trans women as males who are usurping femininity in some way. I mean, if I may be compartmentalizing that wrong, if there are any TERFs in the audience, I apologize for misrepresenting your views. But
in your own life, do you have trouble sort of adjusting and tamping down sort of those traits of masculinity that sort of are sort of the negative things that sort of feminism can point to and be like, or do you just... Does that? I don't even know if that question makes sense. Is that
okay? So,
because you obviously have, your mind has some of that. I mean, or a lot of that sort of male privilege and male way of looking at the world.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I even though it has felt miserable for a lot of it, I have lived a charmed life. I can't say that like my suffering abdicates me from some of the things that I've gotten off easier for. That's for sure. However, having like given up some of that in a way, because I am no longer like the apex predator in society. You know what I mean? I am not a person with no natural enemies.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. Yeah, but not like, how do I put this? Yeah, I guess, because lots of people have an opinion about us, and I feel like a lot of times we have to fight a lot harder for some of the things we feel like we need as human beings, instead of like other people fighting really hard to not have stuff taken away that they feel like is their natural right. You know, we're just like, we want to get married and like pee sitting down in a bathroom that's not horrifying, you know.
You're allowed to go into the men's rooms, right?
Look, I'm allowed to do all kinds of stuff that I really don't want to fucking do.
What I'm saying is the women's bathrooms are horrifying. That's what I was saying.
I don't think so. No.
No, what are you talking about?
Well,
do you spend a lot of time in women's bathrooms?
When I was young, I used to work in restaurants and have to clean both bathrooms, and
the women's restroom.
The women's restroom was always a little more worse.
When a women's restroom is bad, I will admit, pretty fucking bad.
Right.
But
overall, yes, women are much cleaner, care about other people creatures.
Yeah, dude, like the mirrors are usually nicer. Sometimes there's a fucking couch in there for no reason. Yeah, I've never like hung out on a Chase lounge in a bathroom before, but like I could. We could just sit around and dish or whatever. But the thing of it is, it's like, and I how do I put this? I don't necessarily feel like a target, but I do feel like a person who has to justify their existence in a way that is more proactive and more constant.
I don't even think I think about it. Like if you walk into, I'm not really. It's not really registered. Like I got to think differently. I don't have that. Maybe it's just because I know you, but I don't have that if I see somebody out. I have a little like just like I would if I saw somebody, whatever, dressed in a sundress. I'd think, oh, she's like this, or there'd be some stereotypes that my mind is doing, but I'm not.
Well, you're also I wouldn't classify you as a liberal, but you're a more liberal thinking person. You're into human rights. You know what I mean? It's a thing you think about.
Right.
There is a section of humanity and a section of people who don't really consider those things, and I would imagine.
I've been trying really hard not to designate an enemy. Also,
designate, but can't you identify specifically where there is some enemies?
Not in human beings.
Okay.
I think that people naturally are scared of things they haven't experienced before, especially if it questions things that they've always taken for granted as a thing. You know what I mean?
Again, Martin Luther King. That's how we're supposed to try to see them, as not the enemy. And I'm questioning like, ugh, those guys are.
Well, think about it this way.
They deserve a fucking smack in the mouth at the baseball field.
If you begin that conversation with a smack in the mouth type thing, like, hey, you closed-minded motherfucker.
Right.
Where does it go from there?
Right.
It's just like whoever gets louder or quits first or whatever, or it becomes a numbers game. Or is there just more of Team A or Team B? And
you're less likely to find where you are similar by starting at your differences or by being more aggressive, right? I mean, having a conversation, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think having a conversation with somebody who if you're walking in with the difference on display and I'm pointing my finger at you, even though we haven't even started talking yet, just less likely to get to anything constructive or productive at that point. Right?
Right. That's why I'm the dumbest guy in the room, because I didn't think that.
Well, no, I think you're just maybe the cruelest guy in the room. No, but
it's weird because I'm the peace and love, nonviolence guy. I really am.
Yeah.
But it's as you're saying that, I'm like things are going through my head like love your enemy. You're epitomizing.
We're
that.
just now kind of being able to like live out in the open, unfucked with a bit more.
Right.
So I mean, like we're gonna be popping up a bit more, which some people are freaking out about because they're like, well, no, it's like everybody's transgender. Yes. I don't think that's the case. I don't think anybody would do this just for fun. It's expensive. It's a lot of fucking work. This has required more diligence and discipline than most of the things I've done in my life. It is not.
I think that's an interesting point. The amount of work that goes into it. I don't even think about the diligence and the amount of effort that has to go into staying on track with appointments and
Right.
medicines and all of that stuff.
Honestly, things really began in a serious way when I came out of the closet, because it was like the first big real thing that I was like, I'm gonna fucking do this. And
When was that?
I started, it's like recently, man. I have not been doing this long, and it caught everybody by surprise.
So when you say come out of like, it's
I timidly told a couple people, I was like, you know what?
the first person you told. Who was it?
It was another comic.
If you could do it again, would you do it the same way? Would you come out to that person and start that conversation with yourself and with your community, or would you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So was it like, were you sitting there like in your mind, like having that anxiety, like I'm gonna tell him,
Mm-hmm.
and that, or did you just like you had enough beers where you were like, all right, fuck it, you know? Or wait, what was the?
I mean, probably column A, column B, you know,
Right.
but it is something that like, it was like something I needed to get out of my body, you know, and finally having said that was like the first step of like feeling like I had some sort of power.
How'd you phrase it? Like how'd you, when you just?
Gosh, how did I phrase it?
Were you guys just sitting after a show, like drinking a beer or some wine, or were you hanging out, talk like in the parking lot, kind of pacing around? How was
They
it?
were hanging out at my house. We're doing some kind of writing thing, but the
Fucking comedy coming through.
I'm telling you.
Life-changing
So
things.
that's
best fucking, and I'm glad that I came out to a comic first, because I mean, it's hard to surprise one of us. We've had, I don't think a person really gets to do comedy seriously. I mean, maybe there are exceptions, but unless they've had to deal with some fucked up or unexpected, or, you know, it's just
there's some point of interest in a there's an interesting backstory to most
or they
comics.
just have sort of a little bit more open and curious minds and more like
A little bit of both, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, a little-
And then you talk about as you were coming out and then subsequently transitioning, you did it while doing comedy the whole time, which to me is incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And but it also is like I would imagine it gave you like a safe outlet to voice what's going on, what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what you're like. And I am interested in what the jokes are, because in my mind, this is how my comedy mind is like. Here's how I would start to write it and structure it, and I would break it down like, what are the traits of each thing, and how many of those don't cross over? I guess those are the first jokes everybody would write about it. But,
Yeah.
But no,
now that I've made this announcement, me be shopping.
Right, like how many great jokes did you get immediately? Yes.
Me be shopping.
Maybe shopping.
I don't know.
Eric actually recorded. He's very proud of it. He recorded a special, right? Is that all edited and ready to go?
Yeah, it's done.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, it'll be out next month.
So tell me about why you specifically wanted to do a comedy special.
Well, there was a couple things that went into it. I mean, you know, we've been friends for years before the transition and all that stuff. And, you know, I had found funding for a special one way or the other. And then the original person that I wanted to do it with, Renee Luna, he ended up passing. And I was just sitting there with that. And I saw her on stage, and Annie is a much better comic than Anthony was.
You really are.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually have I couldn't be a genuine person on stage, which I think is a thing a person has to be to some extent to be a comic.
But you know what's funny is when I met you, that's one of the things I was like, this. What stood out to me was what I felt was some real genuineness. Like, so
For
it's
sure.
weird for you to say you weren't genuine, because that's one of the things that's jumped out at me was like, oh, this is genuine and interesting, and you also felt like I'm who I am, and fuck everybody, right? And which is weird because you weren't who you were,
Yeah.
but you did a great job projecting that mentality.
Yeah.
I think it's impossible to, you know, we talk about when we're doing comedy, we have to, you're always trying to find your voice. Anthony could not, you couldn't speak in your voice because you hadn't found your voice yet. And there was a time where I saw her on stage and I got really emotional because I was like, holy shit, there's my friend. It was the first time that I had seen it on stage, that she was being herself. And so in my head, when it came to, I was just like, well, time is strange for me. I view time differently than I think I definitely than I used to. But I was like, well, we will never be in this time again, right? If you're talking about a transition from here to here, this space is single use only. You know, we'll go through this one time. And I was like, well, it would seem like a waste of an experience to not document that, right? And
How long did you have to wait for her to get the material and the stage experience with that material?
I think it was only a couple months.
You wrote the material just poured out of you, or you
Yeah.
could use your other material and reframe it?
Well, okay, so I had a lot of stuff going on, but like, so I had written a bunch of material. So I transitioned like a bit before the pandemic, about a year before the pandemic. So I mean, I had some like I just came out jokes and some jokes about just it's like.
And then they put me back in.
Make-
and I had to
yeah,
stay
right.
in there with a mask on my beautiful new face, and now
Yeah.
it's
Oh, my
back
my
out.
friend put the pandemic in such beautiful perspective. He's like, well, you know, you could look at it as like, oh, you're doing all this stuff in private, but I mean, you can do a lot of work on yourself during this time and do it in a way that is more unfettered than it would be trying to navigate all the other stuff outside with other people in a day-to-day kind of sense. And when everybody else comes out of the pandemic, it'll be just like a reintroduction of themselves. But for me, it can be like a debut.
I think we agreed. I proposed a special tour, I think, in June of last year, and we filmed it in September. And what I saw was an immediate course of action that she took. I saw her getting on stage 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a week. And it was just like, I felt really comfortable with it. And I knew that there were things that I could do to ease her process. And I knew that I kept a couple things kind of in the chamber, a little secret from her, so that I could present them in the last few days and be like, all right, these are things we're going to do the night of that I think will make you feel more comfortable. And I think it really worked out. Hopefully it shows in the special, but I think it's a great presentation of where she was at that point. And now what's interesting is, since we filmed it, and we're almost a year away from when we filmed it, she's now gone and changed her life even more. So there'll be so much more interesting things to come.
She's got a whole nother special on the way already.
Or
That's great.
at the very least, another completely unique perspective. What's great about it is I think I've seen her perform a lot. I think that was the best set she had ever had. You know what I mean? Like,
Hands down.
how fucking cool.
And then you get
Yeah.
to capture that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was
So wonderful. That's wonderful.
in the couple weeks, like a week leading up to it, because a lot of the jokes have words that need to be in a specific order, and the patter of them need to be the same, like a da 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 but you know.
Of course, yeah.
So I even practiced those. I practiced those by myself in an empty room, and videotaped myself doing it, and then watched it back to see what it looked like. I mean, I was like, because I didn't want to flub
Right.
any of the lines.
Yeah, there's a
Seinfeld
lot
says
of
confidence comes from knowing your lines.
yeah.
And when you know your
and-
lines and you know your movements and you know, like, then when you're there in that moment where you have to film it or you have to, something else happens in your brain where you feel the cameras, you feel it, and the automaticness of.
Yeah.
Well, then I could actually ad lib
Yeah.
in between some of the jokes, because I knew I knew all the parts.
Well, that's how we named the special. It came from an ad lib that she threw on, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, "That's the fucking name of the thing." So,
What's the name of it?
A bird in a bee suit, which is it's fucking fantastic. You know, she's on the second one. She's riffing on a few things. You know, when you're a kid, nobody talks to you about sex. You know, they tell you about the birds and the bees, or a bird and a bunch of bees, or a bird in a bee suit. And
Two
I thought
bees.
Two bees. And I thought it was fucking hilarious. But so you were asking about what it was like to watch the thing that we had to make, that we made from what you produced. Let's talk about that, because you watched it.
It was fucking crazy because it's one of these things where I was kind of scared to see just my physical appearance, you know, but I looked good. I looked the way I look in my head, and I was scared that I would just look like a big pink rectangle on stage, you know.
Right.
But I didn't.
And you did say that the first time we watched the footage. It was like, this is...
I did, yeah. I saw a clip like a little while afterwards, and I had chills looking at it. But watching the jokes all edited together, and actually, I don't know, like seeing what I think it might be like to watch me. I don't know. It was amazing. I'm proud of it, and I'm also I'm proud to have been a part of like what got produced.
When you came here, you obviously you had sort of I could tell you have sort of you want to say some things. Did you get to cover all that? Did I ask all those questions and more?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Would you care to rate your experience?
Yeah. Would you recommend this to someone? Agree somewhat.
Strongly disagree?
No comment, strongly disagree. No, this was great. And I don't know. I like talking about this stuff. And I
appreciate the
I think
experience for me to talk to somebody about this.
I think it's important. I think it's important to talk about, and I don't think because this can be kind of a rough journey, and for some people, each one of these conversations takes a couple more hit points from your psyche. It gets exhausting for some of us after a while to have to answer some of these questions when our main gig isn't like talking about this stuff and kind of making light of the things that might be sort of confusing other people. Like, just if someone isn't necessarily identifies as an advocate, they still to some degree have to advocate for their way of life. And like, I don't know, it's like, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to do it whenever I can.
Right.
And I mean, even if it's like just it's like a thoughtful conversation at, you know, the Walgreens.
But there's somebody in theory watching this that hasn't
full stop.
Right, that hasn't gone through the experience or is getting ready to go through the experience and is either excited or scared or like, you know, like, I know it's kind of cheesy, but if you could go back and talk to Anthony, what are the things you would tell him to ease his mind about how scared he was to get ready to go through this, or
well,
would you say anything and just let it happen as it's going to happen
that's
for each
a really
individual?
good question. I don't want to be like, oh, I did everything right, but
just your experience.
In my experience, I would say to take it easy on myself. I mean, that's what I told myself during the time. When I mean, if I could go way, way back, I could be like, you know, maybe take a look at this.
Do this sooner?
A little more. Yeah, I mean, I try to not get too hung up in that way of thinking, because regret is just a wasted emotion for me. Right. And also, I don't think I would be the woman I am today if my journey had been different. Like, if there had been like a little less pain involved, or I was at this longer. I mean, I can't definitively say that would have made me happier.
Right.
And also, like, man, it's like hardcore substance abuse kind of stuff. Like, if I had done this maybe differently, there's like a lot of substance abuse in this community. I could be dead from a nose drugs overdose in some strange city, you know?
Right.
But I would reassure myself that like it's so much better. Like the so much pain that you never even knew you had will be gone.
Do you think that translates to every person, regardless of sex or gender or trans? Like,
Yes, I do.
if you just embrace who you are, that you're gonna be happier.
Yeah, I think that even though my experience as a transgender person, I think that it is at its core it's a human experience. Like, I am experiencing things that every human being has to experience in some shape or fashion, but it's in a way that is like on the outside of my body and involves having a different name on my bills now and things like that. And I can talk about sex, and I can talk about, you know, how I be shopping or whatever, but I can always kind of touch back to like exactly that thing. It's just like, you know, the life can be really good, and it's maybe not great to hate yourself or necessarily be super scared of what other people are going to think if you decide to be happy.
I like it.
And I'll tell you, I've never been happier.
That's the wrong show.
I'm not saying I don't want to look inside somebody else's butthole. I'm just saying my specific butthole is probably not in the best shape. You had your headset on, Tom. That would have killed.
That's how it ends.
That's it. That's